Welcome to our final episode of the series. In this episode, we will disclose who the true enemy of the Jewish people is, why, and since when, as our two earlier episodes only revealed the social background to the betrayal of the State of Israel by American Jewry. I will start this episode with a small anecdote. In Israel, we have a saying, "With friends like these, who needs enemies?" You'll understand why. As we showed in previous episodes, the Bund did its work well. It poisoned the minds of almost 7 million American Jews to the point of no return. The Bundist loyalty was to ideology, not inheritance. They brought Bundism with them and planted it in American soil. Loyalty to exile, hostility to sovereignty, worship of universality, and fear of self-determination. And so, when the curtain rose in July 1933 at the Romance of a People, a 3-hour pageant in Soldier Field, it was already too late. The performance ended, and so did the moment. It was a Zionist spectacle performed in a country where the Jewish establishment refused to acknowledge that the Jews were a people, not just a religion. The truth is, most American Jews did not want a Jewish state before the Bund ever arrived. In 1885, a group of Reform rabbis gathered in Pittsburgh and issued a formal declaration of principles. It became known as the Pittsburgh Platform, and it stated plainly, "We consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community." The rabbis went further to say, "We expect neither a return to Palestine, nor a sacrificial worship under the sons of Aaron, nor the restoration of any of the laws concerning the Jewish state." This was a conscious, public renunciation of Jewish peoplehood, written in English for American approval. Even the Bund never went that far. But these Reform rabbis, raised on the German Jewish Enlightenment, saw Judaism as moral philosophy, not covenant. They rejected prophecy, return, and God's promise to Abraham. They believed Judaism had to modernize into a paper religion like Protestant American Christianity, and that this would end anti-Semitism. So they single-handedly tried to erase everything unique in Judaism for the golden calf of Western acceptance. Torah without Sinai. They had no vision. Marxism was only 40 years old. Das Kapital had just been published. Fascism didn't exist yet. It would emerge decades later in response to communism. The Arab world was still tribal under Ottoman rule. The Muslim Brotherhood wouldn't be founded until 1928. But these men lived in an American bubble. They didn't understand the world, just like today. And by trying to make Judaism safe for themselves in an anti-Semitic America, they tore the entire Jewish world in two and handed our future enemies, Nazis, communists, Arab nationalists, and later leftist Jews, the very weapons to try and destroy us. And they did it just 3 years after the first Aliyah had begun, just as Jews in Europe started returning to Eretz Yisrael. From that moment forward, the Jewish Reform leadership in America saw Jewish nationalism not just as unhallowed, but as dangerous. The 1885 Pittsburgh Platform is also why the Arabs are now able to say, "The Jews gave up their land, and therefore Palestine is ours." These American Jews created the ideological framework that still haunts us today. The idea that Judaism is a paper religion, and not a people with rights to land. No declaration, resolution, war, or treaty could undo the damage they caused. It was inflicted globally by a group of pompous, self-absorbed American Reform rabbis who thought they knew better than God and only wanted a quiet life in exile. They were hybrids of universalism and Enlightenment who believed empty ceremonies were enough to call yourself a Jew. This also led to the Khazar theories and all of the mental propaganda used against Jews. By 1942, the contradiction became a complete betrayal. That year, while Hitler's crematoria were operating in Poland, American Reform rabbis and donors founded the American Council for Judaism to oppose the creation of a Jewish state to fulfill the Pittsburgh Platform. Its executive director, Rabbi Elmer Berger, claimed Zionism was a philosophy of despair and a danger to Jewish safety. This is the same language used today by liberal Jews who claim Israel is making us unsafe. The council lobbied Congress, the State Department, and later the United Nations. For Berger, the idea of a Jewish people was a fallacy. "I cannot write about a Jewish people because there is none," he asserted in 1945 in his first full monograph, The Jewish Dilemma. He then continued, To designate Jews as a national group is a vestige of the past. As nations emerge, Jews slowly get out from under the concept of a restrictive, separate nationality group. In a 1943 debate, he stated, "Since the dispersion, we have not been a nation. We have belonged to every nation in the world. Jewish nationalism is a fabrication woven from the thinnest kinds of threads." They lobbied for Jewish refugees to be absorbed into Western countries, but not allowed to gather as a nation. They fought against the very idea of return. Their funding came from major liberal Jewish foundations and leadership from reform pulpits. They opposed Zionism throughout the 1930s and 40s, claiming it was incompatible with American citizenship. Only when the UN partition vote neared and opposition became untenable did the AJC reluctantly express public neutrality but not support. When Israel declared independence in 1948, American Jews stood back. They did not join the fight and did not organize assistance. The only ones who did were a minority of Zionist youth, Holocaust survivors, Mizrahi immigrants, and volunteers with no institutional backing who were considered as radicals. After the war was won, they played along. They celebrated, printed leaflets, took photo ops, and threw fundraisers. They excused their silence as strategy to allow Israel to win. Then they began to throw money at Israel. Not a lot, just enough to make themselves look good and to keep the young poor state in subjugation to their own financial power. Their plan was what we call in Hebrew, mas sefatayim, silence money. They sent donations as a form of control. They built hospitals, libraries, and plaques to put their name on it so they can claim ownership. They didn't move to Israel. They invented the ideology that in order for Israel to be safe, there is a constant need for Jewish presence in the diaspora. An indoctrination even Zionist Jews in America believe now. They treated Israel like a charity case. The message was clear. We allow you to exist, so you do as we say, even if all we gave you was a refrigerator. Their attitude was, if the Zionists want a homeland, we will own it. After 1973, the real trap was set. The Israeli government signed the American aid agreements believing they were securing Israel's survival. In reality, they were walking into an engineered dependence to keep Israel weak and obedient. The AJC sold it as solidarity, but it was leverage. Billions of dollars tied to conditions. Buy only American weapons. Follow American policy. Ask permission before defending yourself. Israel trusted the Jewish donors. The American Jewish donors trusted the leash. The entire system was built and reinforced by American Jewish intermediaries who pushed both governments toward formalization, including AIPAC operatives, Jewish Democratic donors, and later, Clinton and Obama-era Jewish advisors. This, however, started the sweet years when American Jews were proud of Israel, and Israel became popular worldwide. Like the train engine in the book, The Little Engine That Did It. Liberals love the underdog. Barbra Streisand sang Hatikva with Golda Meir. Trees were planted, movies were made, and songs were sung. They came to visit their poor Israeli relatives like tourists on safari. They brought American chocolate, t-shirts that said, "I love Jerusalem," Levi's, and toys. They flashed their money around to their 6-person family crammed into a 1-bedroom apartment in some tiny, shitty neighborhood. We were the tribal spectacle they could point to while living comfortably in New Jersey. Their children volunteered on kibbutzim, spent a summer living like Israelis without any of the consequences, and then they left because they were never planning to stay. To volunteer on a kibbutz was an adventure, not something holy, just a handout to a meager kibbutz that appreciated the extra help. We teenagers loved the girls. They saw us as exotic. On the other hand, we looked at them like gods from America. But years later I realized they were just bored Americans who needed entertainment. Today, Palestine is their new exotic animal to pet, to sleep with, to save. Liberals love an underdog. And the proof? American Aliyah never materialized. In over 75 years, only around 100,000 American Jews have made Aliyah, less than 2% of their total. The lowest Aliyah rate in the Jewish world. The liberal ideology made up of the Bundist and AJC milkshake idealized exile as heroic. It allowed the American Jewry to invent ethical exceptionalism, claiming Jews had a special role to be the conscience of others. To be anti-racist, pro-justice, multi-ethnic, universal, everything except particular. They began to focus on Judaism not as a people, but as a superior set of values. And Israel did not fit those values. This is what also birthed the modern blood libel of Jewish supremacy by the communists and Nazis. They used the Holocaust as central to their ideology, not as a reason to defend Jews, but as a justification for avoiding Israeli military success. The Israeli soldier became a usurper, as their idea of a moral Jew were the Jew in Auschwitz, or the failed Warsaw Rebellion. Their synagogues followed suit. In the 1950s and 60s, American reform and conservative institutions adopted what looked like Zionism, prayers for Israel, fundraising drives, Hebrew school maps. But then came 1967, total victory, the Sinai Peninsula conquered, Judea and Samaria, Gaza, the Golan Heights, and most importantly, Jerusalem reunited. Hakotel Beyadenu, the Western Wall is in our hands. Temple Mount was once again in Jewish hands after 2,000 years, and this broke the liberal American Jewish psyche completely. Within months, Reform rabbis warned that power might corrupt the Jew. American Jewish academics reframed Zionism as colonialism. They lobbied the US government to allow the Waqf keep Temple Mount because these non-covenantal Jews were scared we would build the third temple. Leftist groups compared Israeli soldiers to American police. Jewish studies departments shifted their curriculum from Hebrew history to critical narratives. Hillel became a neutral space on campuses, and they quickly started to drift away from Israel. By the 1990s, the sweet years were over. Israel became a high-tech and weapons superpower and no longer made the American Jews feel noble. It made them feel implicated. They preferred their vision of the innocent, moral, powerless Jew like Tuvia the milkman from Fiddler on the Roof, not the Jew with an atomic bomb and its own Silicon Valley. And today, the fracture is visible from space. The 2021 Pew survey showed the dwindling support for Israel in American Jewry. 93% of Orthodox Jews say they feel attached to Israel. Only 40% of Reform Jews do. Jews with no denomination, whatever that invention is, are 27%. And among Jews under 30, only 35%. American Jewish journalists now sign letters accusing Israel of genocide. American Jewish professors lead boycott campaigns. On the political field, it's worse. George Soros and his ilk have spent the last 4 years trying to overthrow the Likud government, funding radical Israeli leftists to violently protest across the country. Liberal American Jews were actively attempting a coup in a sovereign state, because they think they still own Israel just because they gave their poor cousins a refrigerator in 1973. And then came October 7th. More than 1,200 Jews massacred, raped, burned and tortured in a single day, and 250 hostages taken into Gaza. A massacre so unambiguous, it didn't require commentary. But the liberal American Jews attacked Israel online and in the streets instead of standing with their brothers and sisters. And they finally showed their real face. No Irish American would do this if Cork were bombed. No Italian American would write think pieces against Rome for retaliating after a massacre. No diaspora fights its own people in a moment of war, except this one. And that leads us to the most dangerous truth, the one too sickening to say out loud. But we must, because now we know who the enemy within truly is. The enemy within was, and still is, the court Jews, moneylenders, tax farmers, and their modern descendants, Bundists, liberal elites, Marxists, Bolsheviks, the urban radicals who rejected Torah, Zion, and sold out Jewish nationhood for Western approval and ideological purity, and then let their brothers and sisters burn in Auschwitz, and now by Hamas, as they hate themselves so much, they want to see the covenantal people of Israel burn. Today, they are called the American liberal Jews. These are Jews who have one core belief, that the way to survive anti-Semitism is to stop being Jewish and remain only as a Jew. Jews who treat Zionism with contempt, as if those who hold to covenant and kin are beneath them, or, in our case, dangerous. The grandmother who grew potatoes in a shtetl turned into an Israeli kibbutznik becomes in their eyes the evil Jew. The Jewish world is now divided into black and white. One side stands with peoplehood, survival, and truth. The other chose comfort, fantasy, and betrayal. And honestly, I prefer it this way. How about you?